A nurse fell for her patient with amnesia. Then his millionaire wife showed up at the hospital. Hello, viewer. Thanks for joining us. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments, along with the city you're watching from. Now let's continue with the story. When Anthony Baker opened his eyes in that sterile hospital room, he had no idea he was worth $50 million. No idea he was a ruthless CEO. No idea he had a wife and 2 children searching for him. All he knew was terror, confusion, and the crushing weight of complete emptiness where his memories should have been. The brutal assault had stolen everything from him except his beating heart and the desperate need to understand who he was. Then Megan Collins walked into his room, a nurse with gentle hands and eyes that saw him as a human being worth saving, not just another nameless patient cluttering the overcrowded ward. In those sterile corridors, stripped of wealth and status and memory, 2 souls would discover something neither expected. A love so pure and powerful it would force a man to choose between the life he could not remember and the woman who gave him reasons to forget everything else. Some memories are worth losing. Some loves are worth everything. I do not know who I am. The words escaped Anthony's lips in a whisper that seemed to echo endlessly in the sterile hospital room. He stared at the ceiling tiles, counting the tiny holes in each square, because it was the only thing that made sense in a world that had become completely foreign. Everything else was white noise, chaos, terror. "Sir, can you tell me your name?" The doctor's voice sounded far away, even though the man was standing right beside his bed. Anthony turned his head slowly, wincing at the sharp pain that shot through his skull. "I do not know. Do you remember what happened to you?" "No." "Do you remember anything at all?" The question hung in the air like a physical weight pressing down on his chest. Anthony closed his eyes and searched the vast emptiness where his memories should have been. Nothing, not his name, not his age, not where he lived or what he did for work, or whether anyone in the world might be missing him. "No," he whispered. "Nothing." Dr. Harrison scribbled something on his clipboard, his expression clinical and detached. "Retrograde amnesia following severe head trauma. We will run more tests, but for now, you need rest. The nurse will be in to check on you." Anthony wanted to grab the man's white coat, to beg him not to leave him alone with the terrifying silence of his own mind. But the doctor was already walking away, already moving on to the next patient, the next problem that could be solved with medicine and procedures. Alone again, Anthony stared at his hands. They looked foreign to him, like they belonged to someone else. His fingers were long and lean, with calluses he could not explain. There was a pale band of skin on his ring finger where something had been, though he had no memory of wearing anything there. A nurse entered the room, different from the others who had been in and out all morning. This one moved more slowly, more deliberately. She had auburn hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and warm brown eyes that actually looked at him, not through him. "Good afternoon," she said, and her voice was soft, kind. "I am Megan Collins. I will be taking care of you today." "I do not know my name," Anthony said, the words feeling strange and heavy in his mouth. Megan's expression softened. She pulled a chair closer to his bed and sat down, which surprised him. The other medical staff had maintained their distance, checking his vitals and asking their questions from the foot of the bed. "That must be very frightening," she said. Anthony felt something loosen in his chest. Someone had finally acknowledged what he was feeling instead of just asking what he could remember. "It is," he admitted. "I look at my hands, and they feel like they belong to a stranger. I listen to my voice, and it sounds foreign. I search for any memory, any detail about who I am, and there is nothing, just emptiness." Megan nodded, her eyes never leaving his face. "The doctors say you were found unconscious in an alley downtown 2 weeks ago. You had no identification, no wallet, nothing to tell us who you are. You have been unconscious until yesterday. 2 weeks. Anthony's stomach clenched. Have people been looking for me? Does anyone know I am missing? We have had your photos circulated to local police departments and posted on missing persons databases. So far, no one has come forward. The words hit him like a physical blow. No one was looking for him. No one had noticed he was gone. What kind of person was he that his absence meant nothing to anyone? "Hey," Megan said gently, and he realized she could read the despair on his face. That does not mean you are not important to someone. It might just mean they do not know where to look yet. Or it means I am nobody, Anthony said. Maybe I was homeless. Maybe I have no family, no friends, no life worth remembering. Megan was quiet for a moment, studying his face with those perceptive brown eyes. "You do not talk like someone who lived on the streets," she said finally. "Your speech is educated, formal. Your hands are soft except for some calluses that look like they might be from exercise equipment. You have good dental work. Whatever your story is, I do not think you were homeless." Anthony looked down at his hands again, trying to see what she saw. "How can you tell all that?" "I have been a nurse for 5 years. You learn to read people, to see details that tell a story." She smiled, and it transformed her entire face. "Plus, I grew up with very little money. I know what poverty looks like, and this is not it." "What do people call me here?" Anthony asked. "I need something to answer to. The intake forms list you as John Doe, but if you would prefer something else, we can use whatever you want." "John Doe," Anthony tested the name. "I suppose that will work for now." Megan stood and checked the monitors beside his bed, but she moved slowly, as if she was in no hurry to leave. "Are you in any pain?" "My head hurts. But it is not as bad as the confusion, the fear of not knowing anything about myself. That is understandable. You have been through a terrible trauma. Your brain is still healing." She adjusted his pillow slightly. "Is there anything I can get for you? Anything that might make you more comfortable?" Anthony was about to say no when he realized he was actually cold. The hospital gown was thin, and the room was kept at a temperature that seemed designed more for the medical equipment than human comfort. "I am cold," he said, feeling foolish for such a simple request. Without hesitation, Megan went to a supply closet and pulled out a soft blue blanket. She unfolded it and laid it over him carefully, tucking it around his shoulders. "Better?" she asked. The blanket was warm and soft, and for the first time since he had awakened in this place, Anthony felt a small measure of comfort. "Much better. Thank you." "You are welcome." Megan smiled again. "I know this is overwhelming, but you are safe here. Your body is healing well, and in time your memories may return. Until then, we will take care of you." She turned to leave, but Anthony found himself speaking before he could stop himself. "Will you be here tomorrow?" Megan paused at the door. "I work 3 days a week on this ward. I will be back on Wednesday." "Wednesday," Anthony repeated, trying to hold on to that small piece of certainty in his uncertain world. "Try to rest," Megan said, "and do not be afraid to ask for what you need. The night nurses are good people." After she left, Anthony pulled the blue blanket up to his chin and closed his eyes. For the first time since waking up in this nightmare, he felt like he might be able to sleep without dreaming of the terrifying emptiness where his life used to be. He did not know his name or his past, or who he had been before the darkness took him. But he knew that in 2 days, a nurse named Megan Collins would walk back into this room with her kind eyes and gentle voice. It was not much, but it was something to hold on to. Wednesday arrived with the kind of grey October morning that seemed designed to match Anthony's mood. He had spent the previous day answering the same questions from different doctors, all reaching the same conclusion. His amnesia was severe, and there was no way to predict if or when his memories might return. "Good morning, John." He turned toward the familiar voice and felt something ease in his chest. Megan Collins stood in his doorway, wearing pale blue scrubs and that same gentle smile that had been the only bright spot in his confused world. "You came back?" he said, and immediately felt foolish for stating the obvious. "I told you I would." Megan approached his bed with a small stack of magazines tucked under her arm. "How are you feeling today?" "Physically, much better. The headaches are less severe. Mentally," Anthony paused, searching for the right words. "It is like living in a fog. Nothing feels real or familiar." Megan set the magazines on his bedside table. "I brought you some reading material. I was not sure what you might be interested in, so I grabbed a variety: news, sports, nature photography." Anthony picked up the top magazine, a glossy publication about wildlife conservation. As he flipped through the pages, something stirred in his mind. Not a memory exactly, but a feeling of familiarity. "I think I like this," he said, stopping at a photograph of a mountain landscape. "This feels right somehow." "That is a good sign. Your brain is starting to make connections, even if you cannot access specific memories yet." "Have you heard anything? Any missing person reports that might match my description?" Megan pulled the chair closer to his bed and sat down. "Not yet, but I want you to know that does not mean anything negative about who you are. Sometimes people are traveling for work or visiting family out of state. Sometimes they assume someone is okay when they are not." Anthony studied her face. "You are trying to make me feel better. I am telling you the truth. But yes, I also want you to feel better. It is part of my job to care about my patients' emotional well-being, not just their physical recovery." "Is that what this is? Part of your job?" Megan was quiet for a moment, and Anthony thought he saw something shift in her expression. "Bringing you magazines and sitting here talking with you. No, that is not part of my job. That is just me wanting to help someone who is going through something terrible. Why? Because everyone deserves to be treated with dignity and kindness, especially when they are vulnerable and scared." Anthony felt something warm spread through his chest, and he realized it was gratitude. When was the last time someone had been kind to him for no reason other than basic human decency? He could not remember, but then again, he could not remember anything. "Tell me about yourself," he said. "If I am going to be John Doe for a while, at least I can know something real about someone." Megan smiled. "What would you like to know?" "Everything. Where are you from? How did you become a nurse? What do you do when you are not here taking care of confused patients?" "I am from Portland, Oregon, originally. I moved here 5 years ago for this job. I became a nurse because I wanted to help people, and because I needed a career that would let me take care of my mother." "Is she ill?" "She's getting older and does not have much money saved for retirement. My father left when I was 12, and she worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat. Now it is my turn to help her." Anthony felt a strange ache in his chest. "That is very admirable. It is just what family does for each other. What about you? What feels right when you think about family?" Anthony closed his eyes and tried to reach into the fog of his mind. "I do not know. When I try to think about family, there is just emptiness. Either I do not have anyone, or something is blocking me from remembering them. The doctors say emotional memories are often the last to return after this kind of trauma. Your brain is protecting itself. Protecting itself from what? From whatever was too painful to process. Sometimes amnesia is not just about the physical injury. Sometimes it is about psychological trauma, too. Anthony opened his eyes and looked at her. You think something bad happened to me before the assault? I think you were found beaten and left for dead in an alley. That suggests your life might have been complicated in ways that had nothing to do with the head injury. The thought sent a chill through him. What if his amnesia was a blessing? What if the life he could not remember was one he would not want to reclaim? You are scaring yourself, Megan observed. I can see it in your face. What if I was a bad person? What if there is a reason no one is looking for me? Megan leaned forward in her chair. John, I have been a nurse for 5 years. I have taken care of drug addicts, criminals, people who have made terrible choices. I can usually sense when someone has that kind of darkness in them. And you do not? You are polite to everyone here, even when you are in pain or frightened. You say please and thank you. You worry about being a burden. You ask thoughtful questions. Whatever else you might have been, I do not think you were a bad person. Anthony felt tears prick at his eyes. How can you know that? Because character is not just memory. It is something deeper than that. It is how you treat people when you have nothing to gain from being kind. And you have been nothing but kind since you woke up here. They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes while Anthony processed her words. Outside his window, he could see other hospital buildings and a small courtyard with a few benches and some struggling trees. Is there a place where patients can go outside? He asked. There is a garden on the 2nd floor. It is not much, but it has some fresh air and natural light. Would you like me to take you there sometime? Could you? If the doctor clears you for short walks, I do not see why not. Getting out of this room might be good for you. Anthony felt a flutter of something that might have been excitement. I would like that very much. Then I will talk to Dr. Harrison about it. Megan stood and smoothed down her scrubs. I need to check on my other patients, but I will be back later to see how you are doing. Megan, Anthony called as she reached the door. Yes, thank you. For the magazines, for sitting with me, for treating me like a person instead of just a medical mystery. Her smile was radiant. You are very welcome, John. After she left, Anthony picked up the Nature magazine again and found himself drawn to an article about forest conservation. As he read, he felt that same strange sense of familiarity, as if somewhere in his forgotten past he had cared about protecting wild places. Maybe Megan was right. Maybe character was deeper than memory. Maybe whoever he had been before, there were parts of him worth saving. He held onto that hope as he drifted off to sleep, the soft blue blanket still wrapped around his shoulders. The garden is not much to look at this time of year, Megan said, as she pushed Anthony's wheelchair through the double doors that led to the hospital's outdoor space. But I thought you might enjoy some fresh air. Anthony breathed deeply as the cool October breeze touched his face. After 6 days trapped in his sterile room, even this small courtyard felt like a vast wilderness. The garden was indeed modest, a few benches arranged around some raised flower beds that were mostly brown stalks and fallen leaves now, but it was outside, and it was real. This is perfect, he said, meaning it completely. Megan positioned his wheelchair near a bench and then sat down beside him. How does it feel to be out of that room? Like I can think clearly for the first time since I woke up. Anthony tilted his face toward the weak sun filtering through the clouds. I did not realize how much I needed this. Hospitals can be overwhelming, all the noise and artificial light and medical smells. Sometimes patients forget that healing happens in quiet moments too. Anthony watched a small bird hop along the edge of one of the flower beds, pecking at seeds or insects hidden in the mulch. Tell me more about your life outside of here. What do you do for fun? Megan was quiet for a moment, and when Anthony glanced over at her, she was staring off at the city skyline, visible beyond the hospital grounds. I do not have much time for fun, she admitted. Between work and helping my mother, there is not much left over. That sounds lonely. Sometimes it is, but it is also purposeful. I know why I get up in the morning, what I am working toward. What are you working toward? Security, I suppose, for both of us. My mother never had that growing up, and I want to make sure she is taken care of as she gets older. Anthony studied her profile as she spoke. There was something wistful in her expression, a sadness that she tried to hide behind her professional competence and genuine kindness. What about what you want? He asked. Not what you feel obligated to do, but what would make you happy? Megan turned to look at him, and he saw surprise in her brown eyes. That is a very thoughtful question. I have a lot of time to think. And I have been thinking about you. The words were out before Anthony could stop them, and he felt heat creep up his neck. I mean, I have been thinking about how kind you have been to me, how different you are from the other staff here. Different how? You see me as a person, not just a problem to be solved. You take time to sit with me and talk about real things. You brought me magazines and took me outside when you did not have to. Megan smiled, but there was something shy about it now. Maybe you are easy to talk to, or maybe you are naturally compassionate in a way that goes beyond your professional training. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the bird continue its search for food. Anthony found himself hyper-aware of Megan beside him, the way she tucked a strand of auburn hair behind her ear when the breeze blew it across her face, the way her hands rested gently in her lap, the faint scent of her soap or shampoo that was clean and simple and somehow comforting. "Can I ask you something?" Megan said eventually. "Of course. What do you remember about feelings? I know you cannot access specific memories, but do you remember what it felt like to care about someone, to be close to another person?" Anthony considered the question seriously. "I remember the concept of caring about someone. I understand what it means to feel connected to another person. But I cannot remember experiencing it myself. That must be very isolating." "It was, until you started visiting me." Megan turned to look at him fully, and Anthony felt something shift between them. The air seemed to grow thicker, more charged. "John, I know this situation is complicated," Anthony said quickly. "I know I am your patient and you are my nurse, and I do not even know who I am. But I also know that talking with you is the only time I feel like myself, even if I do not know who that self is supposed to be. You are going to remember eventually. Your memories are going to come back. And when they do, your life is going to change dramatically." "What if I do not want them to come back?" The question surprised them both. Anthony had not meant to say it, but now that the words were out there, he realized they were true. "What do you mean?" Megan asked softly. "What if the person I was before is not someone I want to be? What if this is my chance to start over, to be better than whoever I was?" "You cannot just decide not to remember your life." "But what if I could? What if I could choose to be John Doe forever and build a new life from nothing?" Megan was quiet for a long moment. "That would be running away from your responsibilities, from people who might need you or love you. What if there are no people like that? What if the reason no one has come looking for me is because I was not worth looking for?" "You do not believe that. How can you be so sure?" Megan reached over and touched his hand briefly before pulling away. "Because I am getting to know you, and you are definitely worth knowing." The simple touch sent warmth shooting up Anthony's arm and straight to his chest. He looked down at his hand where her fingers had rested for just a moment. "Megan, I need to tell you something." "What?" "I think I am developing feelings for you. I know that is complicated and probably inappropriate, but I needed you to know." Megan's cheeks flushed pink, and she looked down at her hands. "John, you are vulnerable right now. You are grateful for kindness, and that can feel like something deeper than it actually is. Is that what you think this is? Gratitude? I think you are a man with no past who is trying to build an identity around the only positive connection you have right now. When your memories return, these feelings might not seem as real." Anthony felt a stab of disappointment, but he also heard something in her voice that gave him hope. "What about you?" he asked. "Do you feel anything when you are with me?" Megan was quiet for so long that Anthony thought she might not answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Yes, but that does not mean we should act on it." "Why not?" "Because you are my patient. Because you do not know who you really are. Because when your real life comes back, there might not be room in it for someone like me. Someone like you. A working-class nurse who lives paycheck to paycheck and has family obligations that will never go away." Anthony felt a flash of something that might have been anger. "You think I'm the kind of person who would care about money or social status? I think you might be surprised by who you turn out to be when your memories return." They were interrupted by the sound of the garden door opening. Another nurse appeared and called out to Megan, "Collins, you are needed in room 307. Stat!" Megan jumped up immediately. "I have to go." "Emergency." "I understand." She started to push his wheelchair back toward the building, but Anthony reached up and caught her hand. "Megan, wait." "John, I really have to go." "I know, but I want you to know something. Whatever my memories might tell me about who I was, I know who I am right now. And right now, I'm a man who is falling for a woman who showed him kindness when he had nothing else in the world." Megan's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them away quickly. "We will talk about this later, okay?" "Okay." As she wheeled him back inside and handed him off to another staff member, Anthony felt something he had not experienced since waking up in that hospital bed. Hope. Not hope for his memories to return, but hope that they would not return too soon. He was falling in love with Megan Collins, and for the first time since this nightmare began, that felt like the most important truth in his world. Anthony had been staring at the same page of his magazine for 20 minutes when he heard Megan's familiar footsteps in the hallway. It was Thursday evening, and she was working a double shift to cover for a colleague who had called in sick. "Knock, knock," she said softly from his doorway. "How are you feeling?" "Better now that you are here." The words slipped out naturally, and Anthony saw Megan's cheeks flush pink. Since their conversation in the garden yesterday, there had been a new tension between them, an awareness that made every interaction feel charged with possibility. "I brought you something," Megan said, pulling a small bag from her pocket. "You do not have to keep bringing me things." "I know I do not have to. I want to." She sat down in the chair beside his bed and handed him the bag. "Open it." Inside was a small notebook with a plain blue cover and a pen. Anthony looked up at her questioningly. "I thought you might want to write down your thoughts, your feelings, anything that seems important while you are recovering. When your memories do come back, you might want to remember what this time was like." Anthony ran his fingers over the smooth cover of the notebook. "This is very thoughtful. There is something else, too." Megan reached into her scrubs pocket and pulled out a small digital camera. "I asked my supervisor, and she said it would be okay for you to have this. I thought you might want to take pictures of things that feel meaningful to you. Sometimes visual memories are easier to hold on to than written ones." Anthony took the camera with reverence, as if she had handed him something precious. "Megan, this is too much. This must have cost you money you do not have. It is just a basic model from the electronics store, and you are worth it." Why are you so good to me? Megan was quiet for a moment, clearly weighing her words carefully. Because when I look at you, I see someone who needs care and kindness, and because... She paused. Because I enjoy spending time with you, even though I am just a nameless patient with no past and an uncertain future. Especially because of that. Anthony set the camera and notebook on his bedside table and turned to face her fully. What do you mean? I mean that most people come with so much baggage, so many predetermined ideas about who they are and what they want. You are discovering yourself in real time, and there is something beautiful about that. You make it sound romantic, but the reality is terrifying. I know it is, but you are handling it with such grace, such openness. Most people would be angry or bitter or demanding. You are none of those things. Maybe I was all of those things before, and the head injury fixed my personality defects. Megan laughed, and the sound filled the sterile room with warmth. Somehow I doubt that. Anthony picked up the camera and turned it on. The small screen lit up, showing the basic menu options. Will you let me take your picture? Me? Why? Because you are the first face I remember seeing clearly, the first person who has been kind to me in this new life. I want to remember you exactly as you are right now. Megan looked uncomfortable. I am not very photogenic. You are beautiful. The words hung in the air between them, honest and undeniable. Megan's eyes widened, and Anthony saw her breathing quicken slightly. John, I know we talked about this being complicated, but I need you to know that what I feel for you is not just gratitude or confusion or desperation. It is something real. How can you be sure? Anthony set the camera down and reached for her hand. This time, she did not pull away. Because when you walk into this room, everything else disappears. The fear, the confusion, the emptiness where my memories should be. All of it just fades away, and all I can think about is you. That is a lot of pressure to put on one person. I am not asking you to fix me, or complete me, or fill the void where my past used to be. I am asking you to let me care about you the way you have cared about me. Megan looked down at their joined hands. What happens when your memories come back? What happens when you remember that you have a different life, different priorities? Then we will deal with that when it happens. But right now, in this moment, I know exactly who I am. I am a man who is falling in love with an extraordinary woman. You do not know me well enough to love me? I know that you work extra shifts to help support your mother. I know that you see dignity in every patient, even the ones who are difficult or demanding. I know that you brought magazines to a stranger because you thought he might be bored. I know that you think about other people's comfort before your own. Anthony lifted her hand and pressed it gently against his chest. I know that my heart beats faster every time you walk into this room. I know that the sound of your voice makes me feel safe in a way I cannot remember feeling before. I know that when I try to imagine my future, you are in it. Tears gathered in Megan's eyes. This is crazy. Maybe. But does that mean it is wrong? I do not know. Then let me take your picture. Let me capture this moment so that no matter what happens next, I will always remember the way you look when you are deciding whether to take a chance on us. Megan wiped her eyes and gave him a tremulous smile. Okay. Anthony picked up the camera again and pointed it at her. Through the small screen, he saw her face illuminated by the afternoon light coming through his window. Her auburn hair had escaped its ponytail in a few places, framing her face softly. Her brown eyes were bright, with unshed tears, and something that looked like hope. Perfect, he whispered, and pressed the button. The camera made a soft clicking sound, and suddenly Anthony had his first memory of this new life captured forever. Can I see it? Megan asked. Anthony turned the camera around so they could both see the small screen. In the photo, Megan looked luminous, beautiful, and slightly vulnerable. "I look happy," she said with surprise. "You are happy." "I am. That is what scares me." Anthony set the camera aside and took both of her hands in his. "Megan, I cannot promise you that this will be easy or simple, or that it will work out the way we want it to. But I can promise you that what I feel for you is real and honest and good. What if you remember that you are married? What if you have children? Then I will deal with those responsibilities. But that does not change what is happening between us right now." Megan was quiet for a long moment, studying his face as if she was trying to memorize it. "I have never felt this way about anyone," she said finally. "Neither have I. At least, not that I can remember." "That is not the same thing." "No, it is not, but it is the truth I have to work with." Megan leaned forward slightly, and Anthony felt his breath catch. For a moment, he thought she might kiss him. Instead, she rested her forehead against his. "This is terrifying," she whispered. "I know. And probably a terrible idea. Probably. And definitely against hospital policy. Most likely. But I cannot stop thinking about you either." Anthony closed his eyes and breathed in the clean, simple scent of her hair. "Then do not stop." They stayed like that for several minutes, forehead to forehead, sharing the same air, both of them balanced on the edge of something that could change everything. When Megan finally pulled away, her eyes were bright and determined. "I get off work at 11 tonight," she said. "If you are still awake, maybe I could bring you some real food from the cafeteria, something better than hospital dinner. I would like that very much." "It is just dinner, John. Do not read too much into it." But Anthony saw the smile playing at the corners of her mouth, and he knew that it was much more than just dinner. It was the beginning of something neither of them had been looking for, but both of them desperately needed. "Just dinner," he agreed, already counting the hours until 11 o'clock. At 11:15 that night, Megan appeared in Anthony's doorway carrying a small brown bag and wearing street clothes instead of her scrubs. She had changed into jeans and a soft green sweater that brought out the color of her eyes, and her hair was down around her shoulders. "You look beautiful," Anthony said, and meant it completely. "Thank you." She seemed nervous as she approached his bed. "I brought sandwiches from the deli down the street. I hope turkey is okay." "Anything that did not come out of the hospital kitchen sounds perfect." Megan pulled her chair close to his bed and opened the bag, distributing wrapped sandwiches and bottles of water. "I also brought dessert," she said, producing 2 chocolate chip cookies from her purse. "You thought of everything. I wanted tonight to be special." The admission hung between them. Honest and vulnerable, Anthony unwrapped his sandwich and took a bite, savoring the taste of real food after days of bland hospital meals. "This is incredible," he said. "Thank you." "You are welcome. I also wanted to apologize for earlier. I know I have been sending you mixed signals." "You do not need to apologize for being cautious. This situation is complicated." "It is. But that does not mean my feelings are not real." Megan took a small bite of her sandwich, then set it down as if she was too nervous to eat. "John, I need to tell you something." "What?" "I broke up with someone 8 months ago. A doctor here at the hospital. He was safe, predictable. We had been dating for over a year, and everyone expected us to get engaged." "What happened?" "He wanted me to quit nursing after we got married. He said his salary was enough to support us both, and he wanted me to focus on taking care of the house and planning for children." Anthony felt a flash of anger on her behalf. "He wanted you to give up your career." He said it was not really a career, just a job. He said real wives do not work in hospitals, dealing with sick people and working all hours. What did you tell him? I told him that nursing is not just what I do, it is who I am. I told him that I love taking care of people, and I love the independence that comes with having my own career. Good for you. He said I was being selfish and unrealistic. He said I would change my mind once I understood what marriage really meant. Anthony set down his sandwich and looked at her intently. You deserve better than that. The thing is, he was not a bad person. He just had very traditional ideas about what a marriage should look like. And maybe he was right. Maybe I am selfish for putting my career before relationships. No, Anthony said firmly, you are not selfish for knowing who you are and what matters to you. You are not selfish for wanting a partner who supports your dreams instead of asking you to abandon them. Megan's eyes filled with tears. How do you know exactly the right thing to say? Because I am getting to know you, and I can see how much your work means to you. Anyone who would ask you to give that up does not really see you. What if my memories come back and you turn out to be just like him? What if you are the kind of man who thinks women should stay home and be taken care of? Anthony reached for her hand. Then you will leave me, and you will be right to do it. Just like that. Just like that. Megan, I do not know what kind of man I was before, but I know what kind of man I want to be now. I want to be the kind of man who sees your strength and independence and thinks he is lucky to know you. I want to be the kind of man who encourages your dreams instead of trying to diminish them. You might change your mind when you remember your real life. My real life is right here, right now, sharing sandwiches with you at 11:30 at night in a hospital room. Megan was quiet for a moment. Then she smiled through her tears. When you put it like that, it does sound pretty real. It is the most real thing that has happened to me since I woke up here. They finished their sandwiches in comfortable conversation, talking about everything and nothing. Megan told him about growing up in Portland, about her mother's struggles as a single parent, about her decision to move across the country for nursing school. Anthony shared his thoughts about the books and magazines she had brought him, about the photographs he had been taking around the hospital, about his growing certainty that he wanted to be a better person than whoever he had been before. Can I ask you something? Megan said as they shared the chocolate chip cookies. Anything. What do you hope your life was like before? When you imagine the best possible version of your past, what do you see? Anthony considered the question seriously. I hope I was kind to people. I hope I had work that mattered, that helped people in some way. I hope I was generous with whatever resources I had. What about family? I hope I was a good son, a good brother if I had siblings. I hope... He paused, realizing what he was about to say. I hope I was not married. Why? Because I am falling in love with you, and I do not want that to hurt anyone. I do not want to be the kind of man who abandons his responsibilities or breaks promises he made to someone else. But if you were married, and you do not remember your wife, is it really abandoning her? I do not know. That is what scares me about getting my memories back. What if I remember loving someone else? What if I remember being happy in a life that has no room for you? Megan reached over and touched his cheek gently. Then we will deal with that when it happens. But John, you cannot live your life afraid of what you might remember. You can only live the life you have right now. And right now, I want to kiss you. The words slipped out before Anthony could stop them, but he did not regret saying them. Megan's eyes widened, and he saw her breathing quicken. John, I know all the reasons why we should not. I know this is complicated and risky and potentially heartbreaking for both of us. But I also know that I have never wanted anything more than I want to kiss you right now. Megan looked toward the door, then back at him. If someone comes in, the night shift is light. Most of the nurses are down in the emergency department. This is crazy. I seem to remember you saying that before. Megan laughed softly, then leaned forward until her face was inches from his. If we do this, everything changes. Everything has already changed. This just makes it official. For a moment, they stayed frozen like that, breathing the same air, both of them trembling with anticipation and fear. Then Megan closed the distance between them and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, as if they were both afraid of what it might unleash. But when Anthony's hand came up to cup her face, when Megan's fingers tangled in his hair, something deeper took over. This was not just attraction or loneliness or gratitude. This was recognition, as if their souls had been looking for each other and had finally found what they needed. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. "Oh," Megan whispered. "Yeah, oh." She rested her forehead against his again, and Anthony felt like he could stay in this moment forever. "I should go," she said, but she made no move to leave. "I know. The night supervisor will be making rounds soon. I know. This complicates everything. I know." Finally, reluctantly, Megan pulled away and began gathering the sandwich wrappers and empty bottles. "Megan, yes, I'm not going to regret this. Whatever happens with my memories, whatever my past turns out to be, I will never regret falling in love with you." She paused in her cleaning and looked at him with eyes that were bright with tears and something that looked like joy. "I love you too, John, and that terrifies me more than anything else in my life." After she left, Anthony lay awake for hours, touching his lips and remembering the taste of her kiss. For the first time since waking up in this hospital, he felt like he knew exactly who he was. He was a man in love with Megan Collins. Everything else was just details. Anthony was reading in the garden when he heard the commotion inside the hospital. Voices raised in urgency, footsteps moving quickly down the corridor, the kind of organized chaos that usually meant someone important had arrived. He looked up from his book, a nature photography collection that Megan had brought him yesterday, and saw several hospital administrators hurrying past the garden windows. Something was happening, but from his peaceful spot among the dying October flowers, it felt distant and unimportant. "John," he turned toward the familiar voice and smiled as Megan approached his bench. But something was wrong with her expression. She looked pale, almost stricken. "What is it?" Anthony asked, immediately alert. "What is wrong?" "There are people here to see you. Megan paused, seeming to struggle with her words. "They say they are your family." Anthony felt the world tilt slightly. "My family? A woman and 2 teenagers. They are with Dr. Harrison and the hospital administrator right now. They have been looking for you." Anthony's heart began to race, but not with excitement, with terror. "How do they know it is me?" "The woman recognized your photo from the missing persons database. She has identification for you, medical records, everything." "What is my name?" Megan's voice was barely a whisper. "Anthony Baker." Anthony. The name felt foreign in his mouth, like a word from a language he did not speak. "Anthony Baker," he repeated, testing it. "John, there is something else. Something you need to know before you meet them." "What?" Megan sat down on the bench beside him, but she kept distance between them, as if touching him might make this worse. "The woman is your wife, Rebecca Baker. The teenagers are your children." The words hit Anthony like physical blows. Wife, children, a whole life, a whole family that he had forgotten completely. "No," he said automatically. "That cannot be right." "I am sorry." "I am so sorry." Anthony looked at Megan's face and saw his own devastation reflected there. The woman he loved, the woman who had kissed him just 2 nights ago, was about to watch him be claimed by another life. "I do not remember them," he said desperately. "I do not remember having a wife or children." The doctors say that is normal with this kind of amnesia. Family members are often the last memories to return. What if they do not return? What if I never remember loving her? Megan's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them away quickly. "Then you will have to decide what kind of man you want to be." Before Anthony could respond, Dr. Harrison appeared at the garden entrance with a small group of people. Anthony's breath caught as he saw them for the first time. The woman was tall and elegant, with perfectly styled blonde hair and clothes that looked expensive even to Anthony's untrained eye. She wore a cream-colored coat that probably cost more than most people made in a month, and her shoes were the kind of high heels that suggested she never had to walk very far or very fast. The teenagers flanked her like protective guards. The boy was tall and athletic, with dark hair and green eyes that looked familiar. The girl was smaller, delicate, with blonde hair like her mother and blue eyes that were currently wide with emotion. "Anthony," the woman's voice was cultured, polished. "Oh my God, Anthony, is it really you?" Anthony stood up slowly, his legs unsteady. The woman approached him with careful steps, as if he might bolt if she moved too quickly. "I'm sorry," Anthony said. "I do not remember you." The woman's face crumpled for just a moment before she composed herself. "The doctors explained about your amnesia. I am Rebecca, your wife. These are our children, Brian and Ashley." Anthony looked at the three strangers claiming to be his family and felt nothing. No recognition, no warmth, no sense of homecoming. They looked like perfectly nice people, but they were completely foreign to him. "How long have we been married?" he asked. 15 years. We met when you were 27 and I was 24. You swept me off my feet at a charity fundraiser." Anthony glanced back at Megan, who was standing slightly behind him, her professional mask firmly in place. But he could see the pain in her eyes, the way she was holding herself carefully apart from this family reunion. "Dad," the boy, Brian, stepped forward. "Do you really not remember us at all?" "I am sorry. I know this must be difficult for you, but I have no memory of my life before waking up here 2 weeks ago." The girl, Ashley, started crying quietly. Rebecca put an arm around her daughter's shoulders and looked at Anthony with a mixture of grief and determination. "The doctors say you can be discharged today if we want to take you home. They think familiar surroundings might help trigger your memories." Home. Anthony tried to imagine what his home might look like, tried to picture himself in these people's lives, but there was nothing. "Mrs. Baker," Megan said, stepping forward slightly, "your husband has been through significant trauma. The discharge process will take several hours, and he will need careful monitoring for the next few weeks." Rebecca's gaze shifted to Megan for the first time, and Anthony saw her taking in Megan's simple scrubs, her practical ponytail, her lack of makeup or jewelry. "And you are?" "Megan Collins. I have been Anthony's primary nurse during his stay here." "I see. Well, I'm sure our family doctor can handle his care from now on." There was something in Rebecca's tone, a subtle dismissal that made Anthony's jaw tighten. But before he could say anything, Dr. Harrison stepped forward. "Let me explain Anthony's condition and what you can expect during his recovery." As the doctor began discussing medical details, Anthony found himself watching his supposed family. Rebecca asked intelligent questions and took notes in a small leather planner. Brian stood with his arms crossed, looking angry about something Anthony could not identify. Ashley wiped her tears and studied Anthony's face as if she was trying to memorize it. They seemed like good people. They clearly cared about him, but Anthony felt no connection to them whatsoever. "Anthony," Rebecca said when the doctor finished, "are you ready to come home?" Anthony looked back at Megan one more time. She gave him a small, brave smile and nodded slightly. "I suppose I am," he said, though he felt like he was agreeing to abandon the only real life he had ever known. An hour later, Anthony found himself sitting in the back seat of a luxury sedan that smelled like leather and expensive perfume. Rebecca sat beside him, pointing out landmarks and telling him stories about their life together. "That is the restaurant where we had our first date," she said as they passed an upscale bistro. "You ordered the salmon, and I had the chicken. You were so nervous you spilled wine on your tie." Anthony nodded politely, but the story meant nothing to him. It could have been about strangers. "And that is the park where we got engaged," Rebecca continued. "You had a whole elaborate plan with rose petals and a string quartet, but it started raining and everything got ruined. So you just dropped to one knee right there in the mud and asked me to marry you anyway." "That sounds romantic," Anthony said, because it seemed like the right response. You were always doing thoughtful things like that." "Were." Past tense. Anthony caught the slip and wondered what it meant. When they pulled into the driveway of his house, Anthony's breath caught. It was not a house. It was a mansion. 3 stories of brick and stone, with manicured gardens and a circular driveway that could fit 8 cars. This was wealth on a scale that Anthony had not even imagined. "Welcome home," Rebecca said softly. Anthony got out of the car slowly, staring up at the imposing structure. "I live here. We live here. You bought it right after Brian was born. You said you wanted our children to grow up somewhere beautiful and safe. What do I do for work?" "You are the CEO of Meridian Financial Group. You built the company from nothing after your parents died. You are very successful." CEO. Anthony tried to reconcile that information with the man who had been living in a hospital room, reading nature magazines and falling in love with a nurse. It did not compute. "How much am I worth?" he asked. Rebecca hesitated. "Does that matter right now? I'm trying to understand who I am. Your personal net worth is approximately $50 million. $50 million. Anthony felt dizzy. While he had been worrying about being a burden to the hospital, about having no one to care whether he lived or died, he had been worth $50 million. "Dad?" Ashley appeared at his elbow. "Would you like me to show you around? Maybe seeing your study or your bedroom will help you remember." Anthony looked down at his daughter, this beautiful, sensitive girl who was trying so hard to help him, and felt a stab of guilt. She deserved better than a father who felt nothing when he looked at her. "I would like that very much," he said gently. The house was as impressive inside as it was outside. High ceilings, expensive art, furniture that looked like it belonged in a museum. Ashley led him through room after room, telling him stories about family dinners and Christmas mornings and birthday parties. "This is your study," she said, opening the door to a room lined with bookshelves and dominated by a massive oak desk. "You spend a lot of time in here working." Anthony walked to the desk and picked up a framed photograph. It showed the 4 of them at what looked like a family vacation. Rebecca was beautiful in a red sundress, the children were tanned and smiling, and Anthony had his arm around his wife's shoulders. They looked happy, successful, perfect. He felt nothing. "Do you remember this trip?" Ashley asked hopefully. "We went to Martha's Vineyard last summer. You taught me how to sail." "I am sorry. I do not remember." Ashley's face fell, but she tried to hide her disappointment. "That is okay. The doctors said it might take time." They continued the tour upstairs to the master bedroom, a huge space with floor-to-ceiling windows and a king-sized bed that looked like it belonged in a luxury hotel. "This is where you and Mom sleep," Ashley said, then blushed. "I mean where you sleep together." Anthony walked to the closet and opened it. One side was filled with women's clothes, expensive dresses and suits and shoes organized with military precision. The other side held men's clothing, dozens of business suits, dress shirts, ties that probably cost more than Meghan made in a week. He pulled out one of the suits and held it against himself in the mirror. It was his size, clearly tailored for his body, but it felt like a costume for a play he had never auditioned for. "Does any of this feel familiar?" Ashley asked. Anthony looked around the opulent bedroom, at the expensive furniture and artwork, at the photographs of the family he could not remember. Then he thought about his small hospital room, about sharing sandwiches with Meghan at midnight, about the way she looked when she laughed at something he said. "No," he said quietly. "None of it feels familiar at all." That night at dinner, Anthony sat at the head of a dining room table that could seat 12 people and tried to make conversation with his family. Rebecca had ordered takeout from an expensive restaurant because she said she had been too worried about him to cook. "Tell me about my work," Anthony said, cutting into what was apparently his favorite meal. Filet mignon with truffle sauce. "You started Meridian Financial right after your parents died," Rebecca said. "You used your inheritance as seed money and built it into one of the most successful investment firms on the East Coast. What kind of person was I as a boss?" Rebecca and Brian exchanged a look that Anthony caught but could not interpret. "You were very driven," Rebecca said carefully. "Very focused on success. But what was I like as a person? Was I kind? Did people like working for me?" Another pause. "You were respected," Rebecca said finally. "That is not the same thing." "Dad, you worked a lot," Brian said, speaking up for the first time since they had gotten home. "Like a lot. Sometimes we did not see you for days except when you came home to change clothes." "Brian," Rebecca said sharply. "What?" he asked. "He worked all the time. Mom, even on weekends, even on vacations. Remember last Christmas when he spent the whole day on conference calls?" Anthony set down his fork. "I missed Christmas." "You were there physically," Ashley said quietly, "but your mind was always somewhere else." Anthony felt a sick feeling in his stomach that had nothing to do with the rich food. Was I a good father? The silence that followed was answer enough. "You provided for us," Rebecca said finally. "You made sure we had everything we needed. But was I present? Did I spend time with you? Did I know what was happening in your lives?" "You tried," Ashley said, and her kindness made it worse somehow. Anthony pushed his plate away, his appetite gone. "What kind of marriage did we have?" "Anthony, you have been through a trauma. This is not the time to... Please, I need to understand who I was." Rebecca was quiet for a long moment, staring at her own untouched dinner. When she finally looked up, her eyes were sad but honest. "We have been having problems for the past few years. We were separated when your accident happened." "Separated? Living in the same house but leading separate lives. You had moved into the guest house in the backyard. We were planning to tell the children after the holidays." Anthony felt like the ground was shifting beneath him. "Were we getting divorced?" "The papers were filed in May. We were trying to work out custody arrangements and financial settlements." "You were getting divorced, and no one thought to mention this earlier." "We did not want to overwhelm you," Rebecca said. "The doctor said too much information at once could be harmful to your recovery." Anthony stood up from the table abruptly. "I need some air." He walked outside into the cool October evening, trying to process this new information. His marriage was over. Had been over before his accident. The family reunion scene at the hospital, the careful way Rebecca had introduced herself as his wife, the story about taking him home to familiar surroundings. It was all a performance. "Dad!" Anthony turned to see Brian approaching across the perfectly manicured lawn. "You okay?" "I am trying to be. This is all very overwhelming." Brian sat down on the steps leading to the guest house and looked up at Anthony. "Can I tell you something?" "Of course." "I was kind of relieved when Mum said you guys were getting divorced." Anthony sat down beside his son. "Why?" "Because you were both miserable. You were always angry about work, and Mom was always angry about you being angry about work, and Ashley and I were just trying to stay out of the way. I am sorry. It is not your fault. I mean, it kind of is, but not the amnesia part. The amnesia part is not your fault." Despite everything, Anthony found himself smiling slightly at his son's honesty. "Brian, can I ask you something?" "Sure. Do you think I was a good person before the accident? I mean..." Brian considered the question seriously. "I think you tried to be, but I think you forgot how, somewhere along the way, you got so focused on making money and being successful that you forgot about everything else. Including my family. Yeah, including us." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, looking up at the stars that were barely visible through the light pollution from the city. "Dad?" "Yes." "I hope you do not get your memories back." Anthony looked at his son in surprise. "Why?" "Because maybe this is your chance to be the person you wanted to be before you got lost in all the money and success stuff. Maybe you can start over and do it right this time." Anthony felt tears prick at his eyes. "Thank you for saying that. Just, if you do start over, maybe try to remember that family is supposed to be more important than work." "I will remember that." Later that night, Anthony lay in the king-sized bed in the master bedroom that felt like a luxury hotel room and stared at the ceiling. Rebecca had gone to sleep in Ashley's room, giving him space to adjust to being home. But this was not home. This mansion, this expensive furniture, this life of wealth and status, none of it felt like home. Home was a small hospital room with a blue blanket and nature magazines scattered on the bedside table. Home was sharing midnight sandwiches with a woman who saw dignity in every person she met. Home was falling asleep to the sound of Megan's voice and waking up excited to see her smile. Anthony reached for his phone, then realized he did not know Megan's number. He did not even know if she would want to hear from him now that she knew who he really was. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. The man lying in this expensive bed, surrounded by the trappings of a life he could not remember, was not the man he wanted to be. The man he wanted to be was the one who had fallen in love with a nurse who brought him magazines and saw his worth when he had nothing else to offer. And somehow he was going to find his way back to that man, even if it meant walking away from $50 million and a life that everyone else thought he should want. Rebecca found him the next morning sitting in his study, staring out the window at the guest house where he had apparently been living before his accident. "Good morning," she said, bringing him a cup of coffee. "How did you sleep?" "Terribly. This bed is very comfortable, but it does not feel like mine." Rebecca sat down in the chair across from his desk. "Anthony, we need to talk. About the divorce. About everything. About who we were before your accident. About who we might be now. About what is best for the children." Anthony set down his coffee and looked at his wife. She was beautiful, sophisticated, clearly intelligent. In another life, he might have been able to love her. "Tell me the truth about our marriage," he said. "Not the sanitized version you gave the children, but the real truth." Rebecca was quiet for a moment, seeming to weigh her words. "We fell in love when we were young," she said finally. "You were ambitious and charming, and you made me feel like I was part of something important. I was beautiful and well-connected, and I helped you fit into social circles that were important for your business." That sounds more like a business partnership than a marriage. Maybe it was, toward the end, but it started as love. Anthony. Real love. What happened? You happened. The business happened. Success happened. Rebecca's voice grew sad. You became obsessed with building your company, with making more money, with being more successful than your competitors. You worked 18-hour days, 7 days a week. You missed dinners, missed birthdays, missed school plays and soccer games, and everything that mattered to the children. And I became a single mother who happened to live with a man who paid the bills. You were never present, never engaged. When you were home, you were checking emails or taking phone calls or thinking about work. I felt like I was married to a ghost. Anthony felt shame wash over him. Why did you stay? For the children, for the lifestyle, for the hope that someday you would remember that your family was supposed to matter more than your portfolio. But I never did. No, you never did. And eventually, I stopped hoping. When did you stop loving me? Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. I am not sure I ever stopped loving the man you used to be, but I definitely stopped loving the man you became. Were you happy? No, and neither were you, even though you would never admit it. Anthony leaned back in his chair, processing this information. Rebecca, can I ask you something else? Of course. If I never get my memories back, if I stay the way I am now, would you want to try again? To rebuild our marriage? Rebecca looked surprised by the question. Do you want to try? I'm asking what you want. Rebecca was quiet for a long time, staring out the window at the garden where their children had played when they were small. No, she said finally, I do not think I would. Why not? Because for the first time in years, I feel like I can breathe, because I remember what it feels like to not be disappointed every single day. Because I think we both deserve a chance to find happiness with someone who actually wants to be with us. Anthony felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. So the divorce was the right decision. I think it was. Do you? Anthony thought about his answer carefully. I think the man I was before made choices that hurt you and the children. I cannot change that, and I cannot remember what it felt like to be him. But I know I do not want to be that man again. What do you want? I want to be present for Brian and Ashley. I want to support you in building a life that makes you happy, and I want to figure out who I am when I am not trying to live up to someone else's expectations. Rebecca smiled through her tears. That sounds like the man I fell in love with 20 years ago. Maybe losing my memory was not entirely a bad thing. Maybe not. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, both of them looking out at the garden where their marriage had bloomed and eventually died. Anthony. Yes. There is someone else, is not there? Someone from the hospital. Anthony's heart began to race. What makes you say that? The way you looked at that nurse yesterday, Megan Collins. You looked at her the way you used to look at me. Anthony felt heat creep up his neck. Rebecca, it is okay. I am not angry. Actually, I am kind of relieved. Relieved. Because it means you are capable of feeling something real for someone. It means the accident did not take away your ability to love. I do not know what to say. You do not have to say anything. But Anthony, if you care about her, you need to be honest with her about who you are. About who you were. She deserves to know what she would be getting into. What if she decides it is too complicated? What if she wants nothing to do with Anthony Baker, even if she cared about John Doe? Then you will know she was not the right person for you. But if she does care about you, really care about you, then maybe you will have found something worth more than all the money in the world. That afternoon, Anthony stood outside Metropolitan General Hospital, wearing one of his expensive suits that fit perfectly but felt like a costume. He had driven himself in his BMW, a car he apparently loved, but that felt as foreign as everything else in his supposed life. He took a deep breath and walked through the front doors, past the reception desk where volunteers directed visitors. past the gift shop where people bought flowers and teddy bears for patients they loved. He found Megan in the corridor outside his old room, updating a patient chart. She looked up when she saw him approaching, and the complex mix of emotions that crossed her face told him everything he needed to know about how difficult the past 48 hours had been for her. "Anthony," she said, and his real name sounded strange coming from her lips. "Hello, Megan." They stood there for a moment, the busy hospital corridor flowing around them, both of them uncertain how to navigate this new reality. "How are you feeling?" she asked finally, falling back on her professional training. "Lost? Confused? Like I am living someone else's life?" "That is normal after this kind of trauma. Megan, I need to talk to you. Not as your patient, not as some rich stranger, but as the man who fell in love with you in room 307. Megan glanced around at the busy corridor, then nodded toward a small family consultation room nearby. "We can talk in there." The room was small and private, with comfortable chairs and soft lighting designed to help families process difficult news. Anthony closed the door behind them and turned to face the woman who had become his whole world in the space of 2 weeks. "I do not remember being Anthony Baker," he said without preamble. "I do not remember building a company or making $50 million or being married to Rebecca. I do not remember having children or buying a mansion or any of the life that apparently belongs to me. But it is your life. Is it? If I cannot remember choosing any of it, if none of it feels right or real or like something I would want, is it really my life?" Megan sat down in one of the chairs, and Anthony could see her struggling with her emotions. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that the only life I remember, the only life that feels real and meaningful and worth living, is the one I built with you in that hospital room. Anthony, you have children. You have responsibilities. I know. And I am going to be the best father I can be to Brian and Ashley. I am going to support Rebecca as she builds a new life for herself. But that does not mean I have to become the man I was before. What man were you before?" Anthony sat down across from her and told her everything, about the failed marriage, about his obsession with work, about how he had neglected his family in pursuit of success, about how his own son had been relieved when his parents decided to divorce. "I was not a good person, Megan. I was successful and wealthy and respected, but I was not good. I hurt the people who should have mattered most to me. People can change, but can they choose to stay changed? Can I choose to be John Doe instead of Anthony Baker?" Megan was quiet for a long time, studying his face as if she was trying to read his soul. "What exactly are you asking me?" "I'm asking if you could love Anthony Baker the way you loved John Doe. I'm asking if you think there is a chance for us despite everything you now know about who I was and what my life looks like." "Anthony, I am a nurse who makes $40,000 a year and lives in a one-bedroom apartment. You are worth $50 million and live in a mansion. We come from completely different worlds. Money is just numbers in a bank account. It does not change who I am in here." Anthony pressed his hand to his chest. "It does not change how I feel about you, but it changes everything else. It changes how people see us, how they judge us. It changes the expectations people have for how you should live your life. Only if I let it." "Anthony, you cannot just walk away from $50 million. "Why not?" Because people do not do that. Because it is insane. Because you have responsibilities and obligations and a company to run. What if I do not want to run a company? What if I want to do something that actually matters, something that helps people instead of just making money? Megan stood up and began pacing the small room. You are talking about giving up everything you worked for. I am talking about giving up everything the old Anthony worked for. I'm talking about choosing a life that the new Anthony actually wants. What if your memories come back? What if you remember loving that life, loving the power and success and wealth? Then I will deal with that when it happens. But right now, today, I know what I want. I want a life that feels meaningful. I want work that helps people. I want to be present for my children. And I want to build a future with you. Megan stopped pacing and looked at him with tears in her eyes. This is crazy. Maybe. But is it any crazier than falling in love with someone whose name you did not even know? Is it any crazier than kissing a patient in a hospital room at midnight? That was different. That was simple. This can be simple too, if we let it be. How? Anthony stood up and took her hands in his. By choosing love over fear. By choosing authenticity over expectation. By choosing each other over what other people think we should want. I'm scared. So am I. But I'm more scared of losing you than I am of losing anything else. Megan pulled her hands free and wiped her eyes. I need time to think about this. This is all happening so fast, and I need to process what it would mean. Of course, take all the time you need. Anthony? Yes, the man I fell in love with in that hospital room. He was kind and thoughtful and present. He listened when I talked and cared about my dreams and made me feel like I mattered. Can you promise me that man was real? That he was not just some fantasy created by amnesia and gratitude? Anthony stepped closer to her, close enough to smell her familiar scent of soap and kindness. That man was more real than Anthony Baker ever was. That man was who I am when I strip away all the expectations and obligations and fears that kept me from being authentic. That man is who I choose to be. And if your memories come back, then I will choose to be him anyway. Megan looked into his eyes for a long moment, and Anthony felt like she was seeing straight through to his soul. Okay, she said quietly. Okay? Okay, I will think about it. But Anthony, if we do this, if we try to build something real together, you have to promise me something. Anything. Promise me you will never ask me to be anyone other than who I am. Promise me you will never try to change me or make me fit into some version of what you think your life should look like. I promise. Megan, I fell in love with exactly who you are. I would never want to change a single thing about you. She smiled then, the first real smile he had seen from her since Rebecca had walked into his hospital room. Then, maybe we have a chance after all. As Anthony drove home to his mansion that evening, he felt something he had not experienced since waking up in that hospital bed. Hope for the future. Not hope that his memories would return, but hope that they would not need to. He had found something worth more than $50 million. He had found himself. 3 weeks had passed since Anthony's conversation with Megan in the hospital consultation room, and he had not heard from her. 3 weeks of living in his mansion, trying to navigate his role as CEO of Meridian Financial, attempting to be a father to children who still felt like strangers, and wondering if he had lost the only real thing in his life. The board meeting was ending when his assistant knocked on the conference room door. "Mr. Baker, there is someone here to see you. She says it is personal." Anthony's heart jumped. Send her in. But it was not Megan who walked through the door. It was his daughter Ashley, wearing her high school uniform and looking nervous but determined. "Ashley, what are you doing here? Shouldn't you be in school?" "I had a free period, and I needed to talk to you." Ashley glanced around the impressive conference room with its mahogany table and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. "Is this where you work?" "This is where Anthony Baker works. I'm still trying to figure out if that is who I am." Ashley sat down in one of the leather chairs across from him. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Are you going to remember us eventually? I mean really remember, not just know our names and faces." Anthony felt his chest tighten. This was the question he had been dreading from both his children. "I do not know, sweetheart. The doctors say it is possible, but there is no guarantee, and if you do not, if you never remember our family vacations or teaching me to ride a bike or any of the good memories we had when I was little, then I hope we can make new memories together. Different ones, but maybe better ones." Ashley was quiet for a moment, studying her hands. "Brian told me about your conversation the other night. About how you used to work all the time and miss everything that was important. I'm sorry about that. I know I cannot change the past, but I want to do better going forward. The thing is, Dad, I barely remember you being around anyway. You were always traveling or working late or locked in your study on conference calls. So in a weird way, not having your memories back might actually be a good thing." Anthony leaned forward. "What do you mean?" "I mean, maybe now you can learn how to be our dad without all the pressure and stress that made you so distant before. Maybe we can get to know each other as the people we are now, instead of trying to recreate something that was not really working anyway." The wisdom in his 15-year-old daughter's words hit Anthony like a physical blow. "You are very smart, Ashley. I get that from you, the old you, and maybe the new you too. What brought you here today? What made you want to have this conversation?" Ashley reached into her backpack and pulled out a sketchbook. She flipped through several pages before finding what she was looking for and turning it toward him. It was a drawing of a man sitting on a hospital bed, looking out a window with an expression of profound loneliness and confusion. The technical skill was impressive, but it was the emotional depth of the piece that took Anthony's breath away. "You drew this." "I have been drawing the family for years. Mom in the kitchen looking tired, Brian in his room with his headphones on, trying to block out the fighting. You in your study, surrounded by papers but looking empty." She flipped to another page, showing him a drawing of their family at the dinner table. Rebecca looked distant. The children looked uncomfortable, and Anthony was checking his phone while barely touching his food. "But this one is different." Ashley turned to a new page, and Anthony saw himself sitting in the hospital garden with Megan. The drawing captured the way he had looked at her, the peace in his expression, the connection between them that was visible even in pencil and charcoal. "How did you—" "I went to the hospital yesterday. I wanted to see where you had been, where you met her. I sat in the garden and sketched what I imagined it looked like when you were there with her." Anthony studied the drawing more carefully. Ashley had captured something in his face that he recognized as his truest self, the man he had been with Megan. "What do you think of her, of Megan?" "I think she makes you look the way you look in this drawing. Like you are actually present in your own life. Your mother told you about her. Mom told us that you fell in love with someone at the hospital. She said it was okay because you and Mom were already getting divorced anyway. How do you feel about that?" Ashley was quiet for a moment, flipping through more pages of her sketchbook. "I feel like maybe you deserve to be happy. And maybe Megan deserves someone who will appreciate her the way you never appreciated Mom. I wish I could remember loving your mother the way she deserved. But you can love Megan the way she deserves. You can choose to be better." Anthony felt tears prick at his eyes. "When did you become so wise?" "When I started paying attention to the things adults do not think kids notice." Ashley closed her sketchbook and stood up. "Dad, I have to get back to school. But I wanted to tell you something." "What?" "Brian and I talked about it, and we decided that we would rather have a father who is happy and present some of the time than a father who is miserable and absent all of the time." "What are you saying?" "I am saying that if Megan makes you happy, if she makes you the kind of person who shows up for family dinners and remembers our birthdays and actually listens when we talk, then we want you to fight for her." Anthony stood up and pulled his daughter into a hug. I love you, Ashley, more than I think I ever knew how to show before. I love you too, Dad. The real you, not the CEO you, but the person you are when you let yourself be real. After Ashley left, Anthony sat alone in his conference room, staring out at the city skyline and thinking about what his daughter had said. He picked up his phone and called his assistant. Janet, I need you to schedule a meeting with the board of directors for next week. I have some important announcements to make. That evening, Anthony drove to Megan's apartment building for the first time. She lived in a modest complex in a working-class neighborhood, the kind of place where people knew their neighbors and children played in the courtyard while their parents watched from lawn chairs. He climbed the stairs to the third floor and knocked on apartment 3B. When Megan opened the door, she looked surprised to see him. Anthony, what are you doing here? I needed to see you, to talk to you properly, not in some sterile hospital room, but in your space, in your life. Megan hesitated for a moment, then stepped aside to let him in. Her apartment was small but warm, filled with books and plants and photographs of family and friends. It smelled like something delicious cooking in the kitchen. I was just making dinner, she said. Nothing fancy, just pasta and salad. It smells wonderful. They stood in her tiny living room, both of them uncertain how to navigate this moment. Anthony looked around at her home, taking in the hand-me-down furniture that had been arranged with care, the artwork on the walls that looked like it had been chosen for love rather than status. This feels more like home than my mansion does, he said. Anthony, I know you need time to think. I know this is complicated and scary and probably insane, but I had to come here and tell you what I have decided. What have you decided? I am stepping down as CEO of Meridian Financial. I'm selling the mansion. I'm restructuring my finances so that I can live comfortably but not extravagantly. And I am using the rest of the money to start a foundation. Megan sank down onto her couch. You are giving up everything. I am giving up everything that never really belonged to me anyway. The man who built that company, who chose that life, is not who I am. I want to do work that matters, work that helps people. What kind of foundation? Anthony sat down beside her, careful to leave space between them. I was thinking about healthcare access for underserved communities, maybe funding clinics in areas where people cannot afford basic medical care. Maybe scholarship programs for nursing students who want to work with low-income patients. Megan's eyes filled with tears. Anthony, you cannot restructure your entire life around the hope that I might say yes to dating you. I am not restructuring my life around you. I am restructuring my life around who I want to be. The fact that the person I want to be happens to be worthy of someone like you is just a bonus. What if your memories come back? What if you wake up tomorrow and remember loving the power and the wealth and the status? Then I will choose to love something better. How can you be so sure? Anthony reached for her hands, and this time she did not pull away. Because I have spent the last 3 weeks trying to be Anthony Baker, and it feels like wearing a suit that does not fit. I go to board meetings and listen to discussions about profit margins and market shares, and all I can think about is how much good that money could do if it was spent on something meaningful. Your children need you to be stable. They need security. My children need me to be present and authentic. Ashley came to see me today, and she told me that she would rather have a father who is happy and available sometimes than a father who is miserable and absent all the time. She said that. She drew pictures, Megan, pictures of our family before the accident, and we all looked miserable. Then she drew a picture of me in the hospital garden with you, and I looked like I was finally awake. Megan was quiet for a long moment, studying their joined hands. I am scared, she said finally. Of what? Of being hurt, of falling deeper in love with you, and then having you decide that this simple life is not enough, of becoming dependent on someone who might leave. My father left when I was 12, Megan continued. He said he loved us, but when things got difficult, when money was tight and Mom was working 2 jobs and life was not fun anymore, he just disappeared. I've been taking care of myself ever since. Anthony felt a fierce protectiveness surge through him. I am not your father. How do I know that? How do I know you will not wake up one day and miss the excitement of the corporate world, the adrenaline of big deals and high stakes? Because I have had 3 weeks to miss it, and I do not. Because every day I spend in that office feels like I am suffocating. Because when I imagine my future, none of it includes board meetings or profit reports or any of the things that used to define my life. What does it include? Anthony lifted her hands to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently. It includes you. It includes meaningful work that helps people. It includes being present for my children and building real relationships with them. It includes a life that feels authentic instead of performed. Anthony, I do not need you to be poor to prove that you love me. You do not have to give up everything. I am not giving up everything. I am giving up the wrong things so I can keep the right ones. Megan pulled her hands free and stood up, walking to the window that looked out over the courtyard where children were playing in the early evening light. What if I am not enough? She asked quietly. What if you get tired of this small life, this ordinary existence? Anthony stood and moved to stand behind her, close enough to feel her warmth but not touching. Megan, look out that window. What do you see? Kids playing, families having dinner, people living their lives. I see community, I see people who know each other, who care about each other. I see the kind of life where what matters is not how much money you have, but how you treat the people around you. He turned her gently to face him. I see everything I never knew I wanted. And when the novelty wears off, when the reality of living paycheck to paycheck sets in, then we will figure it out together. Megan, I am not asking you to solve my problems or complete my identity or fix whatever was broken in the old Anthony. I'm asking you to build a life with me as equal partners who choose each other every single day. Megan searched his face as if she was looking for any sign of doubt or deception. What exactly are you asking me? I am asking you to take a chance on us. I am asking you to let me prove that the man you fell in love with in that hospital room was not just a fantasy created by Amnesia. I am asking you to marry me. Megan's breath caught. Marry you. I know it is fast. I know it is crazy, but I also know that I have never been more certain of anything in my life than I am of loving you. Anthony, you do not have to answer right now. Take all the time you need to think about it. But I wanted you to know that I am not asking for a casual relationship or a temporary arrangement. I am asking for forever. Megan was quiet for a long moment, her eyes never leaving his face. Ask me again, she said finally. What? Ask me again. Properly. Anthony felt his heart begin to race. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box that he had been carrying for 3 days, waiting for the right moment. I do not have a ring yet. I wanted you to choose it yourself, something that reflects who you are rather than what I think you should want. He dropped to one knee in her small living room, surrounded by the simple furnishings that somehow felt more luxurious than anything in his mansion. Megan Elizabeth Collins, will you marry me? Will you help me become the man I was always supposed to be? Will you build a life with me that is based on love and authenticity and service to others? Megan looked down at him, tears streaming down her face. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I will marry you. Anthony stood and pulled her into his arms, spinning her around in the small space as both of them laughed and cried at the same time. When he set her down, she cupped his face in her hands and looked into his eyes. I love you, Anthony Baker. Not John Doe, not the CEO, not the millionaire. I love the man who brings me nature magazines and takes pictures of things that matter to him and chooses love over everything else that the world tells him he should want. That is the only man I want to be." She stood on her tiptoes and kissed him, and Anthony felt like he was finally, truly home. 6 months later, Anthony stood in the small chapel at the community center where Megan volunteered, watching his bride walk down the aisle in a simple white dress that she had chosen because she loved the way it felt, not because of what it cost. The wedding was small, attended by Megan's family and friends, by Brian and Ashley and Rebecca, and by the patients and staff from the hospital who had become their extended family. There were no society photographers, or elaborate floral arrangements, or expensive champagne. There were folding chairs and grocery store flowers, and a potluck reception in the community center gymnasium. It was perfect. "You look beautiful," Anthony whispered when Megan reached his side. "You look happy," she whispered back. And he was. Standing there in his simple dark suit, holding hands with the woman who had seen his worth when he had nothing to offer but gratitude and hope, Anthony felt a contentment that $50 million had never been able to buy. "Dearly beloved," the minister began, "we are gathered here today to witness the marriage of Anthony and Megan, two people who have found in each other not just love, but the courage to become their truest selves." As they exchanged vows that they had written together, promising to support each other's dreams and to choose love over fear every single day, Anthony caught sight of Ashley in the front row. She was sketching again, capturing this moment with the same skill that had shown him who he really was. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, when Anthony kissed his bride in front of everyone who mattered to them, Ashley held up her sketchbook. The drawing showed a man and woman surrounded by light, both of them looking complete and peaceful and authentically happy. "That is how you look when you are being real," Ashley mouthed to him over the applause. At the reception, Rebecca approached Anthony as he and Megan were cutting their cake, a simple vanilla creation that Megan's mother had made. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" Rebecca asked. Anthony glanced at Megan, who nodded and went to help serve cake to their guests. "You look different," Rebecca said when they had stepped outside into the warm spring evening. "Different how?" "Present. Like you are actually inhabiting your own life instead of just going through the motions. I feel different. I feel like myself for the first time in my adult life." Rebecca smiled, and for a moment, Anthony could see the young woman he had apparently fallen in love with 20 years earlier. "I am happy for you, Anthony. Really happy." "Thank you, that means a lot coming from you." "Can I tell you something?" "Of course. I was terrified when you lost your memory. Not because I wanted you back, but because I thought you might remember how to be the man I married and realize what you had lost. And now I realize that the man I married got lost long before your accident. This Anthony, the one who just married a woman in a community center because that is where she volunteers, who sold his mansion to start a foundation, who actually listens when his children talk to him. This is who you were supposed to become all along." Anthony felt tears prick at his eyes. "I wish I could have been this person while we were married. I wish I could have saved our family. Our family is not broken, Anthony. It is just different now, and maybe that is exactly what all of us needed." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching through the windows as Megan danced with Brian, both of them laughing at something Ashley had said. "She is good for you," Rebecca said. "She is good for all of us. Did you know she has been helping Ashley with her college applications? And she convinced Brian to apply for that internship at the environmental non-profit. She sees the best in people. It is a rare gift. I know how lucky I am." "Good. Do not ever forget that. Later that evening, as Anthony and Megan danced to their first song as husband and wife, a simple acoustic version of At Last, played by a local musician friend, Anthony felt a deep sense of gratitude wash over him. "What are you thinking about?" Megan asked, her head resting against his chest. "I am thinking about how getting beaten up and left for dead in an alley was the best thing that ever happened to me." Megan laughed. "That is a terrible thing to say. But it is true. If I had not lost my memory, I never would have met you. I never would have discovered who I really am underneath all the money and status and expectations. You would have met me eventually. The universe has ways of putting people together who are supposed to be together. You think we were supposed to be together. I think you were supposed to become this version of yourself, and I was supposed to be there to witness it and support it and love it." Anthony spun her slowly, looking around at their wedding reception. His children were teaching some of the hospital staff how to play a card game. His ex-wife was deep in conversation with Megan's mother about starting a support group for single parents. The night security guard from the hospital was telling stories that had everyone at his table laughing until they cried. "This is what family looks like," he realized. "Not just blood relatives, but chosen family. People who see you and love you and support you becoming your best self. I never had this before. You have it now." As the evening wound down and they said goodbye to their guests, Anthony and Megan walked to their car hand in hand. They were spending their wedding night in a small bed and breakfast an hour outside the city, a place Megan had found online that promised quiet gardens and home-cooked breakfast. "Are you ready for this?" Megan asked as Anthony started the car. "For our honeymoon, for our life, for building something real together." Anthony lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her wedding ring, a simple band they had chosen together at a local jewelry store. "I have been ready since the moment you brought me that first magazine in the hospital. I just did not know it yet." As they drove away from the community center where they had just pledged their lives to each other, Anthony felt something he had never experienced before: complete peace with his choices. He was no longer Anthony Baker, CEO. He was no longer the man who had chosen money over family, status over authenticity, success over happiness. He was simply Anthony, husband to Megan, father to Brian and Ashley, founder of a foundation that would help thousands of people access healthcare. A man who had learned that losing everything was sometimes the only way to find what really mattered. "I love you, Mrs. Baker," he said as they turned onto the highway that would take them toward their new life together. "I love you too," Megan replied. "Both of you. The man you were when you had nothing, and the man you chose to become when you had everything." And for the first time in longer than he could remember, Anthony Baker was exactly where he belonged. 1 year later, Anthony was standing in the kitchen of their small house, attempting to make pancakes for his wife's birthday breakfast. The kitchen was tiny compared to the one in his former mansion, but it was warm and filled with the kind of lived-in comfort that made it feel like home. "Something smells like it is burning," Megan called from the bedroom. "Everything is under control," Anthony called back, quickly flipping a pancake that was definitely more brown than golden. "Should I be worried about the smoke alarm going off?" "The smoke alarm is not going off yet." Megan appeared in the doorway wearing one of his old t-shirts and laughing at the sight of him standing over the stove with flour in his hair and what appeared to be pancake batter on his cheek. "You have been taking cooking lessons for 6 months. And you still cannot make pancakes without it looking like a disaster zone in here. The lessons are working. Look, I have not set anything on fire in weeks. That is a very low bar for success." Anthony abandoned the pancakes and pulled his wife into his arms, not caring that he was getting flour on her shirt. "Happy birthday, beautiful." "Thank you." Although I have to say, the flour-covered, slightly singed breakfast version of you is not how I imagined waking up on my 30th birthday. Is that a complaint? Not even a little bit. Megan stood on her tiptoes and kissed him, tasting like sleep and happiness. I love this version of you. I love our tiny house and your terrible cooking and the way you sing off-key in the shower. I do not sing off-key. You absolutely sing off-key. But I love it anyway. Anthony looked around their small kitchen, taking in the mismatched dishes they had collected from thrift stores, the herbs growing in mason jars on the windowsill, the photograph from their wedding that Megan had framed and hung beside the refrigerator. Do you ever miss it? He asked. The idea of what life with me could have been like if I had stayed wealthy, the big house, the expensive vacations, the financial security. Megan was quiet for a moment, considering the question seriously. Sometimes I think about what it would be like not to worry about money, she said honestly, not to have to budget for groceries or save up for new tires for the car. But then I think about who you were when you had all that money, and I realize I would rather have this version of you and struggle a little financially than have the old version of you and all the money in the world. Even when I burn breakfast. Especially when you burn breakfast, because it means you are trying to do something sweet for me instead of being on a conference call at 6 in the morning. Anthony rescued the pancakes from the stove and managed to salvage enough for a respectable breakfast. As they sat at their small table eating slightly burned pancakes with strawberries and coffee, the morning sun streaming through their kitchen window, Anthony felt the same deep contentment he experienced every day in this simple life they had built together. I have something for you, he said, reaching under his chair for a wrapped package. Anthony, we agreed no expensive gifts. It is not expensive. I made it myself. Megan raised an eyebrow. You made me a birthday present. Well, I made part of it. The rest was a collaborative effort. Megan unwrapped the package carefully and gasped when she saw what was inside. It was a photo album, but not just any photo album. It was filled with pictures Anthony had been taking over the past year, documenting their life together. There were photos of their wedding day, of their tiny house when they first moved in, of Megan in the garden she had planted in their backyard. There were pictures of family dinners with Brian and Ashley, of Anthony at the foundation office, of quiet Sunday mornings when they read the newspaper in bed. But scattered throughout the album were drawings that Ashley had contributed, sketches that captured moments the camera could not. The way Anthony looked at Megan when she was not paying attention, the peace in his expression when he was working in the garden, the joy on both their faces during ordinary moments that had become extraordinary because they were sharing them. Anthony, this is beautiful. Look at the last page. Megan flipped to the end of the album and found a photo of herself that Anthony had taken just the week before. She was in their kitchen, wearing an apron and laughing at something he had said. Flour in her hair and her face glowing with happiness. Underneath the photo, in Anthony's careful handwriting, were the words, "This is what love looks like when you stop pretending to be someone else." Do you remember the first picture I took of you? Anthony asked. In the hospital room, when you were deciding whether to take a chance on us. I remember. You said you looked happy in that photo, and it surprised you. It did. Look at this picture. You do not look surprised by happiness anymore. You look like someone who expects to be happy, who feels like she deserves to be happy. Megan wiped tears from her eyes as she studied the photograph. I do feel like I deserve to be happy now. Good, because you do. And I intend to spend the rest of my life making sure you never forget that. As they finished breakfast and prepared for their day, Anthony reflected on how much had changed in the past year. The foundation was thriving, funding 3 new clinics and providing scholarships for dozens of nursing students. His relationship with Brian and Ashley had grown stronger every month as he learned to be present in their lives. Rebecca had started dating someone new, a kind man who appreciated her intelligence and supported her decision to go back to school for her graduate degree. And Anthony had discovered that a life built on authenticity and service was infinitely more satisfying than anything he had achieved in the corporate world. "What are you thinking about?" Megan asked as she got ready for her shift at the hospital. "I am thinking about how grateful I am that I got lost so completely, that I had no choice but to find my way back to who I was always supposed to be." "And who is that?" Anthony pulled his wife close one more time before she left for work. "A man who knows that the only wealth that matters is the love of a good woman and the chance to make a difference in the world." That is very philosophical for someone who just burned pancakes. The pancakes were not that burned. The pancakes were completely burned, but made with love. That is the only reason I ate them. After Megan left for work, Anthony sat in their small living room with his coffee, looking through the photo album she had left open on the table. Each picture told the story of a man who had learned to measure success not in dollars or deals or public recognition, but in quiet moments of connection and acts of service and the simple pleasure of being authentically himself. His phone rang, interrupting his reverie. It was Brian calling from his sophomore year at college. "Hey, Dad! How are the pancakes?" "How did you know I was making pancakes?" "Because it is Megan's birthday, and you have been practicing for weeks. Ashley texted me a picture of your last attempt. It looked like you were trying to cook hockey pucks. Your sister has no appreciation for culinary experimentation." "Dad, there is a difference between experimentation and disaster," Anthony laughed. "Fair enough. How are classes going?" "Good. Really good, actually. I wanted to thank you again for supporting my decision to major in environmental science instead of business. You do not need to thank me for that. You should study what you are passionate about. The old you would not have said that. The old you would have insisted I get an MBA and join the family business. The old me was not very smart about a lot of things. No, but the new you is pretty great. And Dad, yeah, I am proud of you for choosing love over money, for starting the foundation, for being present in our lives. I know it could not have been easy to walk away from everything you had built." Anthony felt his throat tighten with emotion. "Thank you for saying that. It means everything to me. I love you, Dad. Tell Megan happy birthday for me." After Brian hung up, Anthony sat quietly for a few more minutes, thinking about the conversation. A year ago, his son had been angry and resentful, feeling abandoned by a father who was physically present but emotionally absent. Now they talked regularly, honestly, about everything from Brian's classes to his relationships to his hopes for the future. That transformation alone was worth more than $50 million. Anthony's phone buzzed with a text message from Ashley. "Dad, I'm submitting my college application essay today. Want to know what I wrote about?" He texted back, "Tell me." "I wrote about how watching my dad lose his memory taught me that identity is not about what you remember, but about who you choose to become. I wrote about how the bravest thing I ever saw was watching you choose love over everything else the world told you to want." Anthony had to set down his phone for a moment to compose himself. His daughter, who had spent years feeling invisible to her father, consumed by work and ambition, was writing her college essay about the man he had become when he finally learned what mattered. He texted back, "You are going to get into every school you apply to." Maybe. But more importantly, I learned from the best example of what it means to be authentic. That evening, Anthony and Megan sat on their small back porch, sharing a bottle of wine and watching the sunset paint their tiny garden in shades of gold and rose. It was not the expensive wine Anthony used to drink at business dinners, and it was not the sprawling grounds of his former mansion, but it was theirs. "How was your day?" Anthony asked, refilling her glass. "Good. We had a patient come in today, a homeless man who had been beaten up and had no identification. The staff was treating him like just another indigent case, but I made sure he got the same care we would give anyone else." Anthony felt a familiar warmth spread through his chest. "Of course you did. It made me think about you, about how we met, about how easy it is to overlook someone's humanity when they do not fit into our expectations of who deserves dignity and care. You never overlooked mine. I almost did. When I first saw you in that bed, unconscious and nameless, I thought about just doing the minimum required care and moving on to patients who seemed more important. What stopped you? Something about your face, even unconscious. You looked like someone who had been lost for a very long time, and I have always been drawn to lost things." Anthony reached for her hand. "I was lost. I had been lost for years before the accident. I just did not know it. And now I know exactly where I belong." As the last light faded from the sky and the first stars appeared overhead, Anthony and Megan sat in comfortable silence, both of them reflecting on the strange journey that had brought them to this moment. "Megan, do you think John Doe would be proud of who Anthony Baker became?" Megan turned to look at him, her face soft in the starlight. "I think John Doe would be amazed that Anthony Baker figured out how to be the same person." "What do you mean?" "I mean that the man I fell in love with in that hospital room was always inside you. The amnesia did not create him. It just cleared away all the noise and fear and expectations that were keeping him buried. So you think I would have found my way back to this person eventually?" "I think you would have found your way back to me eventually. Maybe not the same way, maybe not as dramatically, but I believe that souls recognize each other across any circumstances." Anthony lifted their joined hands and kissed her wedding ring, the simple band that meant more to him than any symbol of wealth or status ever could. "I love you, Megan Baker. I love you too, Anthony Baker, all of you. The man you were, the man you are, and the man you are still becoming." As they went inside to their small house with its mismatched furniture and handmade decorations, Anthony felt a deep sense of gratitude for the accident that had stolen his memory, but given him his life. He had lost $50 million, a mansion, a company, and a version of success that the world told him he should want. He had gained a wife who loved him for who he was rather than what he could provide. Children who looked forward to spending time with him, work that made a difference in people's lives, and the knowledge that he was living authentically for the first time in his adult life. It was, without question, the best trade he had ever made. And as he fell asleep beside the woman who had seen his worth when he had nothing else to offer, Anthony Baker knew that he would choose this life, this love, this version of himself, every single day for the rest of his life. Some memories were worth losing, some loves were worth everything, and some men were lucky enough to discover that losing everything was the only way to find what they never knew they needed. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought of the story. See you in the next video.